Greetings, friends! I'm glad to present for you the new episode of our daily wrap-up series. Let's move on straight to our topics for today. On November 23rd, a summit of the Collective Security Treaty Organization was held in Yerevan. The leaders of 6 countries gathered in Armenia. The results are questionable, to say the least. They couldn't even agree on the final document. After all, the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, refused to sign the draft declaration of the Collective Security Council and the document on joint help to Armenia. That is, the head of the country's government did not want to sign the document that should provide help to his own country. It is hard to imagine what help had been proposed to Armenia, but Pashinyan himself stated, "It has not been worked out yet." Although it is possible that this was a reaction to the way ordinary people of Armenia met representatives of the CSTO in their country. For 2 days there were mass protests in Yerevan because of this meeting, and it is clear because of the 3 Armenian requests for help in the conflict over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. All 3 were ignored, and Armenians feel this injustice. They show their attitude towards such friends. Even during the welcome speech, Pashinyan criticized the activities of this military structure. And during the meeting of the Collective Security Council, the Prime Minister of Armenia has once again reminded that the CSTO did not even politically condemn the violation of the agreements reached over the course of Nagorno-Karabakh war.
The CSTO lack of a clear political assessment of the situation and not acceptance of the decision may mean not only the CSTO's refusal of alien obligations, but also be interpreted by Azerbaijan as a green light from the CSTO for further aggression against Armenia. And this contradicts not only the letter, but also the spirit and content of the main documents of the CSTO.
Let me remind you that now the Armenian authorities claim that as a result of hostilities in September, the Azerbaijani military occupied part of the disputed territory. Baku denies this, pointing out that the borders between the countries are not defined and demarked. After that, official Yerevan asked Russia, the CSTO, and the UN Security Council for military assistance. The CSTO sent a mission to Armenia to assess the situation. The issue of assistance is still being discussed. At the same time, when at the beginning of the year during the protests in Kazakhstan, Astana requested help, Armenia sent its contingent overnight. In general, the reaction of the president of Kazakhstan has been inconsistent. Recently, back in January, he asked everyone to help, and now, after Russia's numerous defeats in the war in Ukraine, he demonstratively distances himself from Moscow and its politics. Even the closest friend of Putin, self-proclaimed president of Belarus Lukashenko, made a move towards Russia. During the meeting, he stated that nuclear intimidation has no place in international politics. We remember that during October, questions about a possible nuclear attack on Ukraine sounded in the mass media almost every day. And this is not surprising because Russia is already launching missiles on our territory that can use nuclear warheads. For now, we hope that in the future with ordinary warheads, but who knows what it is in the minds of the soldiers who started a full-scale war in the 21st century. And if Russia asks the CSTO members for support in the war, we hope that its partners will not support it. After all, Armenia is fighting on Azerbaijani's territory if we take the internationally recognized borders. The fact that of all the CSTO members countries except Belarus voted against the UN General Assembly resolution on reparations to Ukraine from Russia shows that there may not be support. In general, due to the war in Ukraine, the military and economic potential of Russia fell sharply, and Moscow fell into diplomatic isolation. Russia is becoming an uninteresting and toxic partner for other CSTO members. And Ukrainians will not be surprised that this organization could collapse. And this will simply be one of the steps on the way to the military defeat of the Russian Federation in Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky signed the state budget of Ukraine for 2023. This will be a very unusual budget. About 18% will go to the defense and security. Out of every $100 earned, 20 will go to the security of the state. For the men and women who protect us. These are the conditions Ukraine currently lives in. Even before the approval of state expenditures, Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal noted that all defense expenditures will be spent from our revenues. But at the same time, there will not be enough for the most necessary medicine, education, energy sectors. And our government, and therefore every Ukrainian, hopes for international partners, the EU, the USA, the IMF, and other donors. We need about $38 billion. And we are very pleased that our friends around the world are also now changing their spending. European Parliament approved the allocation of 18 billion euros. Yesterday, the IMF announced that it had reached a staff-level agreement on a new monitoring program in Ukraine. This mission should once again prove to our partners that we cannot do without support, and we hope will help to activate donor support. At the same time, the implementation of the program's measures will help pave the way for a full-fledged IMF support program. A meeting on this theme is expected till the end of this year. We are happy every day with news coming from different countries and financial organizations. Just imagine, during this week we got the following. The head of the US Treasury said that by the end of the year, Ukraine will receive $4.5 billion in grants from the US. The money will go through the trust fund of the World Bank. Ukraine has already received a tranche of 2.5 billion euros of microfinancial assistance from the European Commission. Another 500 million euros should arrive by the end of the year. The government of Canada is issuing 5-year sovereign bonds for $500 million Canadian dollars, which will be sent to Ukraine's account at the IMF. The Cabinet of Ministers adopted a resolution to receive a €200 million loan from the Netherlands by the end of the year. Norway provided Ukraine with a grant of €195 million to prepare Ukraine for winter. The French Development Agency initiated the provision of €100 million to Ukraine to support the budget. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has approved a financing package of €372 million for Ukrenergo. The funds will be used for operational emergency repairs of damage caused by Russian bombings to civilian energy infrastructure, the EBRD press service reports. Ukraine has already received more than $25 billion in support from international partners. Władysław Rashkovan, Deputy Executive Director for Ukraine at the International Monetary Fund, said another $5 billion will come by the end of the year. However, we understand that this is not enough. After all, every day we receive hits on our energy system. Every day we liberate new territories that have been almost completely destroyed by the Russian occupiers, and we also need money for their restoration. Of course, we expect that Ukraine will receive compensation from frozen Russian assets in the West. Yes, we understand that court decisions and the legal basis are necessary for this, but we hope to receive the money as soon as possible. After all, without the help of global partners, payments for our pensioners, teachers and doctors are at risk. The money is used to build temporary settlements for people fleeing the war, simply helping those who have lost almost everything except their life, dignity and freedom, and the desire to live with the entire civilized world, not a terrorist neighbor. And about terrorism we will talk now, especially about the decision of European Parliament to recognize Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism and a state that uses the means of terrorism. Ksenia Smirnova, who has been working since Monday and talked to many European politicians in Strasbourg, will tell us now about this. So Ksenia, we are waiting for details from the European Parliament from you.
So hello from French Alsace, or I'd say hello from Strasbourg. So I'll start with the main thing, an active discussion among political groups in the middle of the European Parliament about what should be the correct term used, and the resolution on recognizing Russia as a terrorist state has been going on until the day of voting almost. Whether the state is the terrorist or a sponsor of terrorism, there was even a version of a state with a terrorist regime. If the battle is around the name, you can imagine how every letter of the document born in front of our eyes was confirmed. And final decision was finally voted by the majority of the parliament. Only 58 against and 44 chose to be neutral. And we aren't talking about countries, we are talking about political movements in the European Parliament, most of which represent far-right political parties and groups from different countries. Those that political experts issues expected or suspected in some time of connections to Russian interests. For amongst these groups sound the names such as Marine Le Pen, Silvio Berlusconi, and other friends of Putin. Not naming them now, you may follow the site of Europarlament. I just stress this quote. Russian support for far-right parties is driven not so much by ideology as by the desire to destabilize European governments, hinder the expansion of the European Union, and facilitates the coming to power of European governments friendly to Russia. This is Foreign Affairs magazine assures. So going back to the resolution, how politicians explained me about the consequences, they are the next. That is about a broader use of this term than the borders of war in Ukraine itself. They'll recall all the obvious atrocities of Russia from Chechnya through the murders of oppositionists and dissidents of the Kremlin abroad, the poisoning of the Skripals in Salisbury, and the Syrian history with the bombing by Russians to help Assad. When asked about the consequences of such recognition, deputies reasonably argued that the parliament cannot guarantee actual consequences, but politicians want. After the voting, the resolution then turns to the European Commission, which has the authority to develop a set of laws that will become instruments of accountability at all levels. On the example of the attitude towards the terrorist state of the United States, complete isolation of Russia, inability to participate in any international joint activities at the highest political level. Then introduction of secondary sanctions on participants who cooperate with the state sponsor of terrorism, sanctions on politicians' parties of the State Duma for supporting and voting for terrorist laws of Putin. Particular attention was paid to the introductory letter of the terrorist organization of the Wagner and Kadyrov groups, which will close their members' access to the accounts and prevent them from financing these organizations with all the other legal consequences that follow. And then the creation of the Special Court on Crimes of Russia is the next step. I talked to Andrius Kubilius, Litva representative of European Parliament, and he reminded the words of Reagan, the President of the United States: do not be afraid to see what you see and call it what it is. All of Russia's actions are aggressive towards others, fall under the definition of terrorism accepted in the world, so they use terrorism as a tool of their interests. So another main message to politicians and business elites was the sharp: do not rely on business as usual in the future. Well, the main thing is that this resolution and laws will be aimed at creating a basis for transferring the frozen accounts of all participants in the war for the reconstruction of Ukraine by removing the immunity of the state property as well. In the future, there is hope to hear a radical step from the United Nations as well, by withdrawing Russia finally from the participating countries for the same reasons. But the European decision will impose a ban on joint activities at the political level with the Russian Federation as well right now. What's done is done, and now Europe is showing teeth. Hope these teeth are natural and strong enough to swallow dictator's regime once and for a long time, and faster as we can even predict.
Thank you. It was Ksenia Smirnova from the European Parliament, where the fateful decision was made yesterday. Russia was recognized as a state sponsor of terrorism and a state that uses the means of terrorism. That concludes today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for future videos. Subscribe to UATV English and goodbye.